Introduction to failure as a driver of innovation. Failure. It's a word most of us are afraid of. We're taught from an early age that failure is bad, something to be avoided. But what if I told you that failure is actually one of the most important drivers of success? What if I told you that failure is not the end of the road, but the beginning of something much greater? In this section, we'll explore how failure is not just a part of innovation, but the fuel that drives it. Failure forces us to rethink, adapt, and come up with new solutions. And that's where the magic happens. Take a moment to think about some of the most important inventions in history. The light bulb, the airplane, the internet. Do you think these things were created on the first try? Of course not. Each of these inventions was the result of countless failures, experiments, and setbacks. But without those failures, the world as we know it today wouldn't exist. Why failure is essential to innovation. At its core, innovation is about trying new things. It's about stepping into the unknown and pushing the boundaries of what's possible. And when you do that, you're bound to encounter failure. But that's not a bad thing. In fact, it's the opposite. Failure is essential to innovation because it reveals what doesn't work. And knowing what doesn't work is just as important as knowing what does. Every time something fails, it gives us valuable information. It helps us refine our approach, learn from our mistakes, and get one step closer to success. Think of failure as a scientist running experiments. Each failure eliminates one possibility and brings us closer to the right solution. This mindset is what separates successful innovators from everyone else. They don't see failure as something to be feared. They see it as a necessary part of the process. Thomas Edison and the 1,000 failures. One of the most famous examples of failure driving innovation is Thomas Edison. Edison is often celebrated as one of the greatest inventors in history, but what most people don't realize is that his success was built on a foundation of failure. When Edison set out to create the light bulb, he didn't succeed right away. In fact, he failed over 1,000 times before he finally got it right. But instead of giving up, Edison famously said, "I have not failed. I just found 1,000 ways that won't work." This mindset, seeing failure as part of the journey rather than the end, allowed Edison to persevere. Each failure gave him more information about how electricity and materials worked. He learned which materials didn't conduct electricity well, which filaments burned out too quickly, and which designs wouldn't hold up over time. Without those 1,000 failures, Edison wouldn't have been able to invent not just the light bulb, but an entire system of electric power generation and distribution. His persistence in the face of failure changed the world, lighting up homes, streets, and businesses for the first time in history. Failure as feedback. Let's break down the key lesson from Edison's story. Failure is feedback. It tells us what's not working so we can adjust our approach. Every time something goes wrong, we're given valuable data. And with that data, we can make better decisions going forward. Think about a time in your own life when something didn't go as planned. Maybe you tried to launch a new project at work, and it didn't succeed. Or maybe you started a business, and it didn't take off the way you hoped. In those moments, it's easy to feel discouraged. But if you step back and look at the situation objectively, what did you learn from it? What feedback did the failure give you? Once you start seeing failure as feedback, it becomes less scary. Instead of being something to avoid, failure becomes a tool for growth and improvement. It helps you see what needs to change so you can move forward more effectively. Failure forces creativity. Another reason failure is so important to innovation is that it forces us to think creatively. When things are going well, we tend to stick with what we know. But when we face setbacks, we're forced to come up with new ideas, new solutions, and new ways of thinking. This is why failure often leads to breakthroughs. When we hit a wall, we're forced to look at the problem from a different angle. We're forced to question our assumptions, challenge the status quo, and think outside the box. Take the example of the Wright brothers. Before they successfully invented the airplane, They faced countless failures. Their early attempts at flight were disastrous. Their gliders crashed, their engines didn't work, and their designs were flawed. But each failure taught them something new about aerodynamics, engine power, and control systems. It was through these failures that they were able to make the necessary adjustments and ultimately achieve flight. Without those failures, the Wright brothers wouldn't have been able to innovate in the way they did. They wouldn't have been able to create the first successful airplane and revolutionize transportation forever. The role of failure in learning. From a psychological perspective, failure is also essential to learning. Research in neuroscience has shown that our brains learn more from mistakes than from successes. When we fail, our brains go into problem-solving mode. Neurons fire, connections are made, and new patterns emerge. In other words, failure actually rewires our brains for future success. This is why people who experience failure early in their careers often go on to achieve great things later on. They've learned how to adapt, how to pivot, and how to turn setbacks into opportunities. Failure builds resilience, creativity, and a growth mindset, all of which are crucial for innovation. Growth mindset versus fixed mindset. This brings us to an important concept in psychology: the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. People with a fixed mindset believe that their abilities are set in stone. They think that they're either good at something or they're not. And when they fail, they see it as a reflection of their inherent abilities. On the other hand, people with a growth mindset believe that their abilities can be developed through hard work and learning. They see failure not as a personal flaw, but as an opportunity to improve. When they fail, they ask themselves, "What can I learn from this? How can I get better next time?" The growth mindset is key to innovation. It's what allows people to embrace failure and keep pushing forward, even when things don't go as planned. The science behind innovation and failure. Finally, let's talk about the science of innovation. Research has shown that people who experience more failures early in their careers tend to achieve greater long-term success. This is because they've learned how to cope with setbacks, how to adapt, and how to keep going when others give up. Innovation is all about trial and error. It's about experimenting, failing, and then trying again. This process of iteration is what leads to breakthroughs. In fact, many of the world's most successful companies, like Google and Amazon, have built their entire cultures around embracing failure. They encourage their employees to take risks, try new things, and fail fast, because they know that failure is the key to innovation. So the next time you face a setback, remember that failure is not the end of the road. It's just the beginning. It's the fuel that drives innovation and leads to success. Studies of innovators like Edison and Steve Jobs. Introduction to the power of personal case studies. Now that we've established how failure is essential for innovation, let's explore some real-world examples of how this plays out. There's nothing more powerful than looking at the lives of successful innovators who turned massive failures into unprecedented success. In this section, we'll dive into the lives of Thomas Edison and Steve Jobs, two iconic figures who didn't just overcome failure, they embraced it, and it became their superpower. Through their stories, we'll see how failure was an essential stepping stone for their incredible achievements. We'll also touch on another famous innovator, James Dyson, whose persistence through thousands of failures is the stuff of legend. Each of these innovators provides a valuable lesson on how embracing failure can lead to breakthroughs. Thomas Edison, the king of failure-driven innovation. Let's start with Thomas Edison. Known to most of us as the man who invented the light bulb, Edison holds over 1,000 patents and is often regarded as one of the greatest inventors in history. But what many don't know is that Edison's road to success was paved with failure after failure. Edison famously tried over 1,000 different materials and designs before he finally developed a functional light bulb. The trial and error process took him years, and he faced immense skepticism from his peers, the public, and even his investors. Most people would have given up long before reaching the 1,000th attempt, but not Edison. In his own words, he said, "I have not failed. I just found 10,000 ways that won't work." This quote perfectly encapsulates Edison's mindset. He didn't view failure as an obstacle. Instead, he saw it as a necessary part of the innovation process. Each failed experiment brought him closer to the solution, and rather than being discouraged, he was motivated by the knowledge that he was learning from every single misstep. What's remarkable about Edison is not just his eventual success, but the fact that he persisted through failures on a massive scale. For Edison, failure was a critical component of invention. He understood that if he kept pushing, kept trying, he would eventually succeed. And succeed he did. Beyond the light bulb, Edison's other failures and successes. While the light bulb is Edison's most famous invention, it's important to remember that Edison failed in many other endeavors too. Not every one of his experiments was a success, but he never let failure stop him. For instance, Edison attempted to create a machine that could communicate with the dead, a project that was ridiculed at the time and ultimately led nowhere. He also worked on a talking doll that was an abysmal failure in the market. Despite these setbacks, Edison's resilience allowed him to continue pushing the boundaries of technology. He invented the phonograph, the motion picture camera, and numerous other devices that transformed daily life. He wasn't afraid to try things that seemed impossible, and when they didn't work, he simply pivoted, learned from the failure, and tried again. Edison's story teaches us a crucial lesson. Failure is not the enemy of innovation, it's the path to it. By embracing failure, learning from it, and never giving up, Edison changed the world. Steve Jobs, the art of reinvention after failure. Next, let's look at Steve Jobs. Jobs is often remembered for his success as the co-founder of Apple and the visionary behind products like the iPhone, iPod, and MacBook. But his journey was far from smooth. In fact, one of the most defining moments of Jobs' career was when he was fired from Apple, the company he helped create. In 1985, Apple's board of directors ousted Jobs from the company after a series of internal conflicts and declining sales. For most people, being fired from your own company would be a devastating failure. But for Jobs, it was the beginning of something greater. Jobs' comeback story. The power of failure and reinvention. After leaving Apple, Jobs could have disappeared into obscurity. But instead, he chose to reinvent himself. He founded a new company called Next, which focused on creating high-end workstations for businesses and universities. Though Next was not a huge commercial success, it served as a crucial learning experience for Jobs, who used the time to refine his vision for the future of technology. During this period, Jobs also acquired Pixar, a small computer graphics division that was struggling to find its footing. Under his leadership, Pixar transformed into a groundbreaking animation studio that revolutionized the film industry with hits like Toy Story, Finding Nemo, and The Incredibles. Jobs' work with Pixar showcased his ability to turn failure into success, and it reinforced his reputation as a visionary. But the story doesn't end there. In 1997, a struggling Apple brought Jobs back as CEO, and from that point forward, he led the company to develop some of the most iconic products of our time. The iMac, iPod, iPhone, and iPad redefined consumer technology and cemented Apple's place as one of the most valuable companies in the world. Had Jobs not experienced the failure of being fired from Apple, he might never have developed the leadership skills and vision that led to Apple's resurgence. In interviews, Jobs often spoke about how getting fired was one of the best things that ever happened to him because it freed him to explore new ideas and perspectives. Jobs' story shows us that failure is not the end. Instead, it's a detour that can lead to greater success. His ability to bounce back from failure, learn from his mistakes, and reinvent himself is a powerful example of how embracing failure can lead to extraordinary innovation. James Dyson. Persistence through 5,127 failures. Finally, let's look at James Dyson, the British inventor behind the famous Dyson vacuum cleaner. Dyson's story is one of sheer persistence in the face of failure. Before his vacuum cleaner became a household name, Dyson spent 5 years creating over 5,000 prototypes, minus 5,127, to be exact, before he finally developed a design that worked. That's right, minus 5,127 failures. Imagine spending years of your life on a project, only to fail over and over again. Most people would have quit after the first few failures, but not Dyson. He believed in his vision, and he kept pushing forward, learning from each failure and improving his design with every iteration. Dyson's big breakthrough came when he developed the first bagless vacuum cleaner that used cyclonic separation technology to remove dust and dirt from the air without clogging. This innovation revolutionized the vacuum cleaner industry, and today, Dyson is a global brand known for its high-quality, innovative products. Dyson's story is an incredible example of how persistence in the face of failure can lead to groundbreaking success. He once said, "Success is made of 99% failure." This mindset, that failure is not something to be feared, but something to embrace, is what allowed Dyson to keep going, even when the odds were against him. Dyson's failures didn't just lead to a successful vacuum cleaner. They laid the foundation for an entire company that continues to push the boundaries of technology and design. From bladeless fans to air purifiers, Dyson's products are a testament to the power of perseverance and the willingness to fail. The common thread: resilience and a growth mindset. What do Edison, Jobs, and Dyson have in common? They all viewed failure as a necessary part of the innovation process. They didn't let failure stop them. Instead, they used it as fuel to keep pushing forward. Each of these innovators possessed a growth mindset, the belief that abilities and intelligence can be developed through hard work and learning. They understood that failure wasn't a reflection of their worth, but a tool for learning and growth. By adopting a growth mindset, these innovators were able to see failure as feedback, not defeat. They learned from their mistakes, made adjustments, and kept moving forward. This mindset allowed them to achieve success on a scale that most people can only dream of. The takeaway: embrace failure as part of the process. So, what can we learn from the stories of Edison, Jobs, and Dyson? The key takeaway is that failure is not something to be feared. It's something to be embraced. Failure is part of the process of innovation, and without it, we would never make progress. When you encounter failure in your own life, whether in your career, your personal projects, or your relationships, remember that failure is a learning opportunity. It's a chance to refine your approach, think creatively, and build resilience. The next time you fail, don't give up. Instead, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? How can I use this failure to get better? By adopting this mindset, you'll be able to turn failure into your greatest asset. Psychological and philosophical insights on failure. Introduction: the human relationship with failure. Failure is not just something that happens in the world of innovation. It's deeply intertwined with the human experience. We've all experienced failure in some form, whether it's a failed project at work, a relationship that didn't work out, or a personal goal we didn't achieve. The way we process and react to failure shapes our mindset and, ultimately, our success. In this section, we'll dive into the psychological and philosophical perspectives on failure, exploring how our minds are wired to react to setbacks and how ancient wisdom can help us reframe failure in a way that leads to growth, resilience, and innovation. Understanding failure on a deeper level allows us to embrace it rather than fear it, transforming it into a powerful tool for self-improvement. The psychology of failure: understanding the emotional response. From a psychological perspective, failure can trigger strong emotional reactions. When we fail, our brains often interpret it as a threat to our well-being. This goes back to our survival instincts. In prehistoric times, failure could mean the difference between life and death. Failing to find food, build shelter, or protect ourselves could be catastrophic. As a result, our brains evolved to view failure as something dangerous. Even today, when failure isn't usually life-threatening, our brains still respond to it with feelings of fear, anxiety, and even shame. These emotions are natural, but they can also be overwhelming and paralyzing if we don't learn how to manage them. When we fail, the emotional part of our brain, known as the amygdala, goes into overdrive. This part of the brain is responsible for processing emotions like fear and stress. It's the same part that triggers the fight or flight response when we perceive danger. So when we encounter failure, our first instinct is often to retreat, avoid risk, and protect ourselves from further disappointment. But while this response might have been useful in ancient times, it can hold us back in today's world. If we allow fear of failure to control our decisions, we'll avoid taking the risks necessary for growth and innovation. The key is learning how to override this emotional response and reframe failure as an opportunity for growth. Growth mindset versus fixed mindset. The key to handling failure. This is where the concept of the growth mindset comes into play. The term growth mindset was popularized by psychologist Carol Dweck, who conducted extensive research on how people respond to challenges and setbacks. In her studies, Dweck found that people tend to fall into one of two categories: those with a fixed mindset and those with a growth mindset. Fixed mindset. People with a fixed mindset believe that their abilities, intelligence, and talents are set in stone. They think that they are either good at something or they're not, and no amount of effort can change that. Because of this, people with a fixed mindset are often terrified of failure. To them, failing means they aren't good enough, and they fear that failure will expose their weaknesses. Growth mindset. On the other hand, people with a growth mindset believe that their abilities and intelligence can be developed through hard work, learning, and perseverance. They see failure not as a reflection of their worth, but as a learning opportunity. When they fail, they ask themselves, "What can I learn from this? How can I improve?" For people with a growth mindset, failure is simply part of the process of getting better. The growth mindset is essential for embracing failure and using it to drive success. When you have a growth mindset, failure doesn't feel like the end of the road. It feels like a stepping stone toward improvement. You start to see failure as valuable feedback rather than a personal indictment. This mindset shift is critical because it frees you from the fear of failure. You become more willing to take risks, try new things, and push yourself beyond your comfort zone. And when you're not afraid of failure, you open yourself up to greater opportunities for innovation and success. The role of resilience in dealing with failure. Another important psychological concept when it comes to failure is resilience. Resilience is the ability to bounce back from setbacks, to keep going even when things don't go as planned. And just like a growth mindset, resilience is something that can be developed over time. We often think of resilience as a trait that some people are just born with. But the truth is, resilience is a skill, one that can be strengthened through practice and experience. Every time we fail and pick ourselves back up, we're building resilience. And the more resilient we become, the better equipped we are to handle future challenges. How can we build resilience? One effective way is by practicing what's known as voluntary discomfort. This is an idea rooted in Stoic philosophy, which we'll talk more about in a moment. Voluntary discomfort means intentionally putting yourself in situations that are uncomfortable or challenging, so you can train your mind to handle adversity. For example, you might take a cold shower instead of a hot one, sleep on the floor for a night, or go a day without using any technology. These small acts of discomfort help you build mental toughness and resilience. They teach your brain that you can handle discomfort and that failure isn't something to be feared. The more you practice resilience in small ways, the better prepared you'll be to handle bigger failures when they come. Philosophical insights on failure, stoicism, and acceptance. Let's shift gears for a moment and explore how ancient philosophers thought about failure. One of the most enduring philosophies that teaches us how to deal with failure is Stoicism. The Stoics, who lived in ancient Greece and Rome, believed that failure, hardship, and adversity were natural parts of life. Rather than trying to avoid these experiences, the Stoics believed in embracing them with acceptance and resilience. For them, the key to a good life was learning how to remain calm and composed in the face of challenges, rather than being swept away by emotions like fear or anger. The dichotomy of control. At the heart of Stoicism is the idea of the dichotomy of control. This concept teaches that there are two types of things in life: things we can control, things we cannot control. According to the Stoics, we should focus our energy only on the things we can control, like our thoughts, actions, and attitudes, and let go of the things we cannot control, like the outcome of events, other people's opinions, or the circumstances we find ourselves in. When it comes to failure, the dichotomy of control is incredibly powerful. The Stoics teach us that we can't always control whether we succeed or fail, but we can control how we respond to failure. We can choose to learn from it, grow from it, and move forward with resilience. Epictetus on failure. One of the most famous Stoic philosophers, Epictetus spent much of his life teaching about the power of perspective. He was born a slave, faced tremendous adversity, and eventually became one of the most respected philosophers of his time. Epictetus taught that we must accept the things that are beyond our control and focus on our own actions. In one of his most well-known quotes, he said, "The chief task in life is simply this: to identify and separate matters so that I can say clearly to myself which are externals not under my control, and which have to do with the choices I actually control." This mindset can be incredibly freeing when we encounter failure. Rather than feeling overwhelmed by what went wrong, we can focus on what's within our control, our response, our effort, and our next steps. When we adopt this Stoic perspective, failure no longer feels like a defeat. It becomes an opportunity to practice resilience and growth. How Stoicism can help us embrace failure in modern life. While the Stoics lived thousands of years ago, their teachings are still relevant today, especially in a world where failure is often viewed as something shameful or catastrophic. In modern life, we often place a lot of pressure on ourselves to succeed, and when things don't go as planned, it can feel like the end of the world. But Stoicism teaches us to take a step back, breathe, and remember that failure is just a part of the human experience. The next time you experience failure, try to apply the principles of Stoicism. Ask yourself, what is within my control right now? What can I learn from this experience? How can I move forward with calm and resilience? By shifting your mindset in this way, you'll start to see failure not as something to be feared, but as something to be embraced. Failure becomes an opportunity for growth, and it no longer has the power to derail your progress. The power of perspective. Reframing failure. One of the most powerful psychological tools for dealing with failure is the ability to reframe it. Reframing means changing the way you view a situation so that it serves you better. For example, let's say you've just experienced a major setback at work. Maybe a project you've been working on for months didn't pan out the way you expected, or a promotion you were hoping for went to someone else. It's natural to feel disappointed, but how you frame this situation in your mind will determine how you move forward. If you see the failure as a reflection of your abilities or worth, you might become discouraged and give up. But if you reframe the failure as a learning experience, an opportunity to grow and improve, you'll be much more likely to bounce back and try again. The power of yet. There's a simple but powerful word that can help you reframe failure: yet. When you say, "I haven't succeeded yet," you're acknowledging that failure is temporary. You're reminding yourself that success is still possible, even if it hasn't happened yet. For example, instead of saying, "I'm not good at public speaking," try saying, "I'm not good at public speaking yet." This small change in language shifts your mindset from one of defeat to one of possibility. It reminds you that failure is just part of the process, and with time and effort, you can improve. Embracing failure as a path to growth. Failure is a natural part of life, and it's something we all experience. But how we respond to failure makes all the difference. By understanding the psychology behind failure, adopting a growth mindset, building resilience, and applying the principles of stoicism, we can turn failure into an opportunity for growth, learning, and success. Remember, failure is not the end of the road. It's just the beginning of something new. When you embrace failure, you free yourself from the fear of making mistakes, and you open the door to greater innovation, creativity, and personal growth. How to turn personal setbacks into success. Introduction. The power of personal setbacks. We've all faced personal setbacks in our lives. Those moments when something we've been working hard for doesn't go as planned. Whether it's a career setback, a failed relationship, or a personal goal we didn't achieve, setbacks can leave us feeling defeated and discouraged. But here's the good news. Setbacks are not the end of your story. In fact, they can be the catalyst for your greatest successes. The key is knowing how to respond to setbacks in a way that turns them into opportunities for growth and transformation. In this section, we'll explore practical steps you can take to turn personal setbacks into success. We'll dive into proven strategies for reframing failure, building resilience, and leveraging your setbacks to propel you forward. By the end of this section, you'll have the tools you need to see every setback as a stepping stone toward achieving your goals. Step 1. Reframe failure as feedback. One of the most important steps in turning setbacks into success is learning how to reframe failure. Instead of viewing failure as a dead end, start thinking about it as valuable feedback. Failure provides us with critical information. It shows us what didn't work, which can be just as important as knowing what does work. The key is to shift your mindset from seeing failure as a personal flaw to seeing it as a necessary part of the learning process. What does it mean to reframe failure? Reframing failure means changing the way you interpret and respond to setbacks. Instead of thinking, "I failed, so I must not be good enough," try thinking, "I failed, so now I know what I need to improve." This shift in thinking takes failure from being something negative to something constructive. Imagine you've been working on a new business venture, but after months of hard work, it doesn't succeed. It's natural to feel disappointed, but if you reframe the failure as feedback, you can start to look at what the experience taught you. Maybe you learn more about what your customers want, or maybe you discovered areas where your product could be improved. This feedback is incredibly valuable, and it's something you can use to make your next attempt more successful. Failure as a data-driven process. Think of failure as a form of data collection. Every time something doesn't go as planned, you're collecting data about what doesn't work. In the world of business and science, this approach is known as iteration, the process of making gradual improvements through trial and error. For example, when launching a product, companies often go through multiple iterations based on customer feedback. Each failure, or each piece of negative feedback, is viewed as valuable data that helps them refine the product until it meets the needs of their customers. The same principle applies to our personal lives. Every setback is an opportunity to refine and improve our approach. Ask the right questions after a setback. To effectively reframe failure as feedback, start by asking yourself a few key questions after experiencing a setback. What went wrong and why? What did I learn from this experience? What can I do differently next time? These questions help you focus on the lessons that the setback can teach you. They shift your attention away from the disappointment of the failure itself and toward the constructive steps you can take to improve. When you adopt this mindset, you stop fearing failure and start embracing it as part of the growth process. Step 2. Build resilience through practice. Resilience is the ability to bounce back from setbacks, and it's one of the most important qualities you can develop if you want to turn failure into success. Resilience doesn't mean you won't face challenges. It means you have the strength to keep going when you do. So, how do you build resilience? Like any skill, resilience can be strengthened through practice and experience. The more you face adversity, the more resilient you become. How small challenges build resilience. One of the best ways to build resilience is by intentionally putting yourself in challenging situations. This doesn't mean seeking out failure. but it does mean taking on tasks or challenges that push you out of your comfort zone. For example, you might set a personal goal that feels just out of reach, like running a marathon, learning a new language, or taking on a leadership role at work. These types of challenges force you to confront difficulties and setbacks along the way, but they also give you the opportunity to practice resilience. As you face these smaller challenges, you'll develop the mental and emotional strength needed to handle bigger setbacks when they come. You'll start to see that failure isn't something to be feared. It's just part of the process of getting better. Voluntary discomfort, a stoic practice for building resilience. One practical way to build resilience is by practicing voluntary discomfort. This is a concept borrowed from Stoicism, the ancient Greek philosophy that we touched on earlier. The idea behind voluntary discomfort is simple. By intentionally putting yourself in uncomfortable situations, you train your mind to handle adversity with greater ease. For example, you might try taking cold showers, fasting for a day, or spending time without your usual luxuries. These small acts of discomfort help you build mental toughness and prepare you to handle larger challenges. When you practice resilience in small ways, you'll be better equipped to bounce back from bigger setbacks. Real-world example: athletes and resilience. Athletes provide a great example of how resilience can be built through practice. Take professional runners, for instance. They don't become world-class athletes overnight. Instead, they build their strength and endurance through years of practice, during which they face countless setbacks like injuries, poor performances, and tough competition. Each time they fail, they learn something new about their bodies and their sport. They adapt, they improve, and they keep moving forward. Over time, they build the resilience needed to compete at the highest levels, and when they do fail, they're able to bounce back stronger than before. You can apply this same principle to your own life. By facing challenges head-on and pushing through setbacks, you'll develop the resilience needed to keep moving forward, no matter what obstacles you face. Step 3. Embrace risk and uncertainty. Innovation and progress often require taking risks. But for many of us, the fear of failure can prevent us from taking the necessary risks that lead to success. The truth is, no great achievement comes without some degree of risk. If we want to achieve something meaningful, we have to be willing to step into the unknown and embrace uncertainty. Why do we fear risk? Fear of risk often stems from our fear of failure. We worry about what will happen if things don't go as planned. Will we lose money? Will we embarrass ourselves? Will our reputation suffer? These fears are normal, but they can also be limiting. If we allow fear to control our decisions, we'll avoid taking the very risks that could lead to our greatest successes. The key to overcoming this fear is to reframe how we think about risk and uncertainty. Reframing risk. What's the worst that could happen? One powerful way to embrace risk is by asking yourself, what's the worst that could happen? Often, we build up failure in our minds to be much worse than it actually is. But when we take a step back and look at the worst-case scenario, we often realize that it's not as catastrophic as we imagined. For example, let's say you're considering starting a new business, but you're afraid of the financial risk. If you ask yourself, what's the worst that could happen? You might realize that, while there is a risk of losing money, it's not the end of the world. You can recover financially, and in the process, you'll gain valuable experience and knowledge. This shift in thinking allows you to take calculated risks without being paralyzed by fear. It doesn't mean you'll be reckless, but it does mean you'll be more willing to step outside your comfort zone and try new things. Real-world example: entrepreneurs and risk. Entrepreneurs are often seen as risk-takers, but the most successful entrepreneurs don't take blind risks. Instead, they take calculated risks. They weigh the potential rewards against the potential downsides, and they move forward when the benefits outweigh the risks. Take Elon Musk, for example. When Musk founded SpaceX, many people thought he was taking an enormous risk. After all, most private companies that had tried to enter the space industry have failed. But Musk believed in his vision, and he was willing to take the risk because he saw the potential rewards. In the early years, SpaceX faced multiple setbacks, including failed rocket launches that nearly bankrupted the company. But Musk kept going. He understood that failure was part of the process and that taking risks was necessary to achieve his long-term goal of revolutionizing space travel. Today, SpaceX is one of the most successful aerospace companies in the world, and Musk's willingness to embrace risk has paid off in a big way. Step 4. Learn to pivot after failure. Sometimes, turning a setback into success requires making a pivot. A pivot means changing your approach, adjusting your strategy, or even shifting your goals in response to a failure or setback. This doesn't mean abandoning your dream. It means finding a new path to achieve it. When you experience a setback, it's important to stay flexible and open to new possibilities. Sometimes the path you initially set out on isn't the right one, but that doesn't mean your journey is over. By learning how to pivot, you can adapt to changing circumstances and find a new way to move forward. How to pivot effectively. Here's how you can pivot effectively after a setback. Assess the situation. Take a step back and analyze what went wrong. Was the failure due to external factors beyond your control? Or was it something about your approach that didn't work? Understanding the root cause of the failure will help you decide how to pivot. Adjust your strategy. Once you've identified what went wrong, think about how you can adjust your strategy moving forward. This might mean changing your approach, setting new goals, or seeking out new opportunities. Stay committed to your vision. Pivoting doesn't mean giving up on your dream. It means finding a new way to achieve it. Stay focused on your long-term vision, but be flexible in how you get there. Real-world example. Netflix's pivot. A great example of a successful pivot is Netflix. When Netflix first started, it was a DVD rental service. Customers would order DVDs online, and they would receive them in the mail. While this model was successful for a time, it became clear that the future of entertainment was in streaming. Rather than clinging to their original business model, Netflix pivoted. They transitioned from a DVD rental service to a streaming platform. And today, Netflix is one of the most successful media companies in the world. By staying flexible and adapting to new trends, Netflix was able to turn a potential setback into a massive success. Conclusion: turning setbacks into success. Every setback is an opportunity for growth. By reframing failure as feedback, building resilience, embracing risk, and learning to pivot, you can turn any personal setback into a stepping stone toward success. Remember, failure is not the end of the road. It's just part of the journey. The key is to keep moving forward, learning from your experiences, and staying open to new possibilities. When you adopt this mindset, setbacks become opportunities, and failure becomes the foundation for your greatest successes. Modern failures that led to success. Modern examples of turning failure into success. We've talked a lot about how failure is part of the process of achieving success, and we've looked at historical figures like Thomas Edison and Steve Jobs who turned setbacks into extraordinary accomplishments. But what about modern-day examples? How do contemporary innovators and leaders handle failure, and what can we learn from their stories? In this section, we'll dive into the stories of modern entrepreneurs and creators like Elon Musk, J.K. Rowling, and others who faced enormous challenges and failures before achieving worldwide success. Their journeys show us that failure is not just an obstacle, it's often the very thing that leads to greatness. Let's explore how these modern-day visionaries overcame failure, and how their resilience, creativity, and willingness to take risks transformed their lives and industries. Elon Musk and SpaceX. Overcoming failure to reach the stars. Elon Musk is one of the most well-known entrepreneurs of our time, with companies like Tesla, SpaceX, and SolarCity under his belt. But what many people don't realize is that Musk's journey to success was riddled with failures, especially in the early years of SpaceX. The early failures of SpaceX. In the early 2000s, Musk set out to revolutionize space travel by founding SpaceX, with the goal of reducing the cost of space exploration and eventually making life multiplanetary. But things didn't go smoothly. The company's first 3 rocket launches between 2006 and 2008 were complete failures. The first rocket exploded after 25 seconds. The second failed to reach orbit. The third rocket also didn't make it, leading to catastrophic financial losses. At this point, SpaceX was on the verge of bankruptcy, and Musk had used up nearly all his personal savings to keep the company afloat. The pressure was immense. Musk was facing the possibility that SpaceX, his bold vision for space exploration, might collapse entirely. But instead of giving up, Musk took these failures as lessons. He analyzed what went wrong with each rocket launch, identified the problems, and made adjustments for the next attempt. Turning point: the 4th launch. In 2008, with only enough money left for one more rocket launch, SpaceX attempted its 4th Falcon 1 mission. This time, it succeeded. The rocket reached orbit, marking the first privately developed spacecraft to do so. This breakthrough saved SpaceX and led to a $1.6 billion contract with NASA to deliver cargo to the International Space Station. Today, SpaceX is one of the most successful aerospace companies in the world, known for its reusable rockets and ambitious projects like Starship, which aims to take humans to Mars. Musk's ability to persevere through multiple failures, learn from them, and keep pushing forward was key to SpaceX's success. The lesson: persistence and adaptation. Musk's story with SpaceX teaches us that failure is often an integral part of innovation, especially when you're attempting something that's never been done before. Musk didn't see the failures as a reason to give up. Instead, he saw them as valuable data points. Each failure brought him closer to the solution. His willingness to take risks, adapt, and keep going despite setbacks is a powerful example of turning failure into success. J.K. Rowling and Harry Potter. From rejection to global success. J.K. Rowling's journey from a struggling single mother to one of the most successful authors in the world is a classic example of how failure and rejection can eventually lead to triumph. Early struggles and rejection. Before Harry Potter became a global phenomenon, Rowling was living on welfare, struggling to make ends meet while raising her daughter as a single mother. She had been working on the manuscript for Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone for years, pouring her heart and soul into the story. But when it came time to find a publisher, Rowling faced a series of rejections. In total, 12 different publishers rejected Harry Potter. Some didn't think the book would sell, while others doubted that children would be interested in a story about wizards. The constant rejection was discouraging, and Rowling later described this period as one of the most challenging times in her life. But she didn't give up. Rowling believed in her story and kept pushing forward, despite the setbacks. Eventually, a small publishing house called Bloomsbury decided to take a chance on Harry Potter. They offered her a modest advance, but they still weren't sure the book would be a success. Turning point: the rise of Harry Potter. What happened next is now literary history. Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone became a massive success, selling millions of copies worldwide and launching one of the most successful book franchises of all time. Rowling went from being a struggling writer to becoming one of the wealthiest authors in the world, and her stories have since inspired generations of readers. But without those early rejections, Rowling's story might have been very different. The lessons she learned from facing adversity helped her develop the resilience needed to keep going, even when the odds were stacked against her. The lesson: believing in your vision. Rowling's journey teaches us the importance of believing in your vision, even when others doubt you. Her ability to push through rejection and keep working toward her goal is a powerful example of how setbacks can ultimately lead to extraordinary success. Sometimes it's the persistence in the face of failure that makes all the difference. Jeff Bezos and Amazon. Learning from early failures. Today, Amazon is the largest online retailer in the world, and its founder, Jeff Bezos, is one of the richest people on the planet. But like many successful entrepreneurs, Bezos didn't achieve success without facing significant failures along the way. Amazon's early struggles. When Bezos first launched Amazon in 1994, it started as an online bookstore. The internet was still in its early days, and many people were skeptical of the idea of buying books online. The company faced intense competition from established retailers, and there were plenty of moments when Amazon's future looked uncertain. Bezos was willing to take risks and experiment with new ideas. Some of those ideas worked, like expanding Amazon's product offerings beyond books, but others were complete failures. For example, Amazon once launched an online auction site to compete with eBay, but it failed to gain traction. The company also experimented with a now-forgotten smartphone, the Amazon Fire Phone, which was a commercial flop, turning failure into innovation. Rather than seeing these failures as defeats, Bezos viewed them as valuable experiments. In fact, Bezos is known for encouraging a culture of innovation and risk-taking at Amazon, where failure is seen as a necessary part of the process. Bezos once said, "If you're not failing, you're not innovating enough." This mindset allowed Amazon to keep experimenting with new ideas and learning from failures. The company's willingness to take risks and adapt after setbacks has led to the development of hugely successful products and services like Amazon Prime, AWS, Amazon Web Services, and Alexa. The lesson: failing forward. Bezos' story teaches us that failure is an essential part of innovation, especially in fast-paced industries like technology. By fostering a culture where failure is seen as a learning opportunity rather than a setback, Bezos was able to keep Amazon moving forward, even when individual projects didn't work out as planned. Sarah Blakely and Spanx, turning rejection into a billion-dollar brand. Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, is another modern-day example of how turning rejection and failure into opportunities can lead to incredible success. Early rejections and setbacks. Before founding Spanx, Blakely worked as a door-to-door fax machine saleswoman. She had an idea for a new type of women's undergarment, footless pantyhose that would smooth out lines without the discomfort of traditional hosiery. But when she tried to pitch her idea to potential manufacturers, she faced rejection after rejection. No one believed in her product. Blakely's first attempts to find a manufacturer who would produce her product failed. Many doubted that there was a market for her invention. But instead of giving up, Blakely kept going. She spent years developing the prototype, using her savings to fund her efforts. After countless rejections, she finally found a manufacturer who was willing to take a chance on her idea. Turning point. Spanx becomes a household name. In 2000, Spanx officially launched, and it wasn't long before the product took off. Oprah Winfrey, one of the most influential media personalities in the world, named Spanx as one of her favorite products, giving the brand a major boost. Spanx quickly became a best-selling product, and Blakely went on to build a billion-dollar brand. Blakely's story is a perfect example of how persistence and resilience can turn failure and rejection into success. Today, she's one of the most successful female entrepreneurs in the world, and her journey is an inspiration to anyone who has faced setbacks in their own business or personal life. The lesson: resilience and adaptation. Blakely's story teaches us the value of resilience and the importance of never giving up on a good idea, even when others don't believe in it. Her ability to adapt to rejection and keep pushing forward is what ultimately led to the success of Spanx. Conclusion. Modern failures leading to success. The stories of Elon Musk, J.K. Rowling, Jeff Bezos, and Sarah Blakely remind us that failure is not the end. It's often the beginning of something much greater. Each of these modern-day innovators faced significant setbacks and failures on their journey to success, but they didn't let those failures define them. Instead, they used them as opportunities to learn, grow, and innovate. The lesson we can take from these stories is clear. Failure is an essential part of success. Whether you're an entrepreneur, an artist, or someone pursuing personal goals, Setbacks are inevitable, but how you respond to those setbacks will determine your ultimate success. Embrace failure as a learning experience, stay resilient, and keep pushing forward. The path to success is rarely a straight line, but with the right mindset, every failure can bring you one step closer to achieving your dreams.